Can auction houses provide USPAP quality appraisals, or can they cost you hundreds of thousands of dollars, or can both of these statements be true? Today on Behind the Gavel with Jason, we're going to talk about and analyze the recent Ninth District Appeals Court's ruling on the Estate of Kollsman versus Commissioner case, in which an auction house's appraisal was thrown out essentially due to several factors, and ended up costing the estate over $500,000 in taxes, penalties, and fines. Let me go ahead and share this on my page real quick, and I'll get some more details on here. So we do appraisals here at the Casey Auction and Appraisal Company. We do them regularly, not as often as we used to, as we're gotten really busy in the auction end of our business. But we do a lot of appraisals, and we get contacted regularly for appraisals for other people. And so this is a very timely conversation for us. It might be for you as well. If you need appraisals done, or if you're considering it, or if you had appraisals done in the past, what are some of the things, some of the pitfalls that might come your way if you had somebody do the appraisal that wasn't qualified? So let's talk about the Estate of Kollsman versus Commissioner real quick. I've got some notes written down here because there's a lot of numbers and details I want to make sure I get correct. Kollsman died in 2005. At some point afterwards, the estate was being, distributed amongst the heirs and deciding upon what's going to happen. I'm going to keep, going to sell. Kollsman was a major collector of old master artwork and other pieces, had a great collection, obviously. As part of that process, they hired an appraiser from Sotheby's to come and to appraise several pieces, but the two in particular we're going to talk about. One was by Peter Bruegel the Younger, known as Maypole, and the other was John Bruegel the Elder, known as Orpheus. The auction house put an appraised value on Maypole of $500,000 and on Orpheus of $100,000. When the estate was turned in, the paperwork was turned in to the IRS. The IRS took exception to these two valuations in particular. Obviously, there was more to the estate, but these are the two that have caused the problems for the estate and for the appraiser and the auction house. The IRS expert said that Maypole should have been valued at $2.1 million and that Orpheus should have been appraised at $500,000. So they came up with a value of $2.6 million, and the auction house appraiser came up with a value of $600,000. And taxes on $200,000 is a lot of money. Originally, the tax deficiency was $781,488. That was several years ago. I want to say that was in 2010 or 11. And of course, that takes into account the taxes owed at the time of the death. That's when all of these, that's the basis date when the person died. That's the date, that's the line in the sand. That is ground zero for valuation. So from that point, the IRS appraisal said that those pieces were worth 2.6. The auction house appraiser said 600,000. And so based upon the taxes owed and the delinquencies, the late charges, the interest accrued, at that point it was $781,000. There was a ruling on this a couple of years ago, proving those numbers. It was appealed, and the appellate court is what we're talking about today, the Ninth District Appeals Court, and that was filed June 21st of just this year, so just 2 months ago. After the appeal, the tax deficiency was claimed to be $585,836. That's $195,000 difference for the estate to their positive. In the appeals process, they found that there was no, the IRS expert didn't take into account less value based upon condition of both of the pictures, and that's where that $200,000 difference came into play. So why was this thrown out? What happened to cause these appraisals, and these two in particular, to have such big red flags? And then what were the reasons for the original appraisals being thrown out? I've been to some classes on the IRS being involved in appraisals. there is a threshold value for an estate. If an estate is worth more than X dollars and there's art involved in that, the IRS actually has an arts council, essentially, that reviews all appraisals for estates of that value. And if they recognize a deficiency or delinquency or a discrepancy is the best word. If they notice a discrepancy in the values, then it will be pulled aside for more investigation and audit. And that is obviously what happened here. What the appellate court found, they had three main reasons with a lot of sub-reasons to dismiss the valuations from the auction house. Number one was a lack of objectivity. Number two was the exaggeration of poor conditions of those paintings. And then three, the lack of a comparable sales use for determining value. And because of that, the appraisal was thrown away. So let's look at those one by one. Lack of objectivity. The estate contacted Sotheby's for the appraisal. Sotheby's does appraisals. They do them every day. I'm sure they do hundreds every day, and they can do a great job. In this instance, the person at Sotheby's decided not to go deep into the weeds, not to spend any time. He just kind of shot from the hip for a couple of reasons. At least according to the courts, there was a couple of reasons. One was there was an inherent conflict of interest. When he sent back the appraisal, with that document, he also sent them a exclusive right to sell contract for the works of art. Exclusive right to sell for 6 years. So there's obviously a conflict. There's a conflict of interest, and there's a financial incentive to the appraiser. And the incentive was to appraise them low for the tax purposes. We have seen appraisals both high and low, and of course we've seen many appraisals dead on the money. But in this instance, the appraisal was given as a low figure to save the estate hundreds of thousands of dollars in taxes. The expert at Sotheby's did not use comparable sales. He did not take the time to give evidence to why he said that Maypole was worth $500,000 and Orpheus is worth $100,000. He just said that's a $500,000 painting, that's a $100,000 painting. He didn't do any research, or didn't document any research to support his assertions of value. He also exaggerated the poor condition. The collector smoked, and he had owned some of these paintings for decades. And so the combination of the smoke and just dust and dirt and not having them cleaned and conserved regularly made the paintings look to be in much worse condition than they were. Nicotine is not a good thing for art, but honestly, it actually kind of encapsulates art. So if the structure of the painting is good, if the way the paint is adhering to the canvas or board or other materials, then nicotine almost acts as a protectant, because it's if you've ever seen a painting that looks yellow but should be white, the nicotine is almost giving a protective film on top of the painting. And so the appraiser gave more, he said he deducted much more value because of the poor condition of the works. The IRS looked at that, brought in a conservator, and said, yes, they were filthy, they were dirty, they were nicotine covered, tar covered, stained, but they cleaned, the stability of the painting was there, so the restoration could easily be done. And that restoration was done on both the pictures. And then we already talked about the comparable sales and lack thereof. The biggest issue, as far as I can tell, is that the appraiser didn't take his time to do the correct job. He just basically, the conflict of interest is just paramount in this conversation. If he had done his job correctly and gave them values, even if he'd have come in and said, because of the condition, it's worth 1.5 million as opposed to the 2.1, the IRS is probably not going to get too worked up over that. But when you have a difference of $2 million on two pictures, the IRS is going to look at that very, very closely. And one of the things that we're very cognizant of when we do appraisals of any level, and we've not done $1 million paintings yet, but we're very cognizant of laying out exactly what we're doing and making sure that our client or potential client understands the differences between an appraisal and an appraised value and an auction estimate, auction value. They can be very similar, but they can be drastically different. And so we have to make sure that those differences are understood and known before we even begin any work. And we talk to clients and potential clients about that all the time. In this case, it looks like it was a flat out, he was buying the option. You've heard in real estate, buying the listing by listing a house at 20% more than its value so you can get your sign in the yard. This is exactly what it appears that he did here. And so that is the major reason for the courts to dismiss and disregard his appraisal work on these two pictures, is that he completely didn't do his work. He didn't document his work. He didn't do the research necessary to support his work. And because of that, his client has been fined and taxed over $500,000 because of it, much, much later in the conversation. Now, the estate obviously has money. There's money there to pay that. They're supposed to pay that. That's how our system is set up. The painting of the maypole painting by Peter the Younger, it sold 3.5 years after the auction house did the appraisal at that auction house for $2.4 million, Hammer? $2.4 million is what that sold for. Hey, Ann, how you doing? Thanks for watching. If you have any questions, let us know. We're talking about how appraisals by auction houses can be great, but they can also be rife with pitfalls and concerns. So the auction house sold the painting for $2.4 million after giving it a $500,000 appraised value just 3.5 years prior. The market had obviously changed. This is talking about 2009, 10, 11 in that front time frame. We'd hit rock bottom at 7 and 8. We were starting to come out of it at that point. But the old masters market at this level wasn't affected as greatly as some of the others, because that's, generally speaking, old money buying old masters. And so the old money is hardly ever affected by a recession. I don't know if you've always noticed that as well. But having said that, the courts agreed, both the original court and the court district, both agreed that the financial interest and the financial incentive and the conflict of interest was the main reasons that they explored everything else. So it's one of those things where it's like when your kids do something bad, they do something that gets you in the room to investigate what that bad thing was. You might find other bad things in your kids' room. I have 2 teenage boys. You have an idea of what can be found there. Once you invite that investigation, anything is open game, especially in a tax situation. So once they started looking, they really analyzed the processes used, the information provided, and the reasons for the valuations, and determined unequivocally that the conflict of interest and the financial interest were what caused the original valuations, appraisals, to be so drastically reduced from where they should have been. So if you're looking for appraisals, what do you want to make sure you're getting done right? And most of us are not having $500,000 or $2 million paintings appraised, but even on lesser value pieces, you want to make sure the person you're working with understands the reasons for the appraisal, understands what is expected of them, both from the estate, from the tax attorneys, and the IRS, if at that level. And you want to make sure that you're having those conversations before you start writing checks. Because once you start writing checks, you end up in a situation where you've invested your time, you've invested your money, you've invested your resources, and it's easier to continue down that path than it is to start fresh with somebody else. So ask those good questions. Do some research on your own. If you have a valuable, important estate or collection, take some time. I know it is time consuming. It is a challenge to get it done correctly, but it's so much better to do it right the first time. In this case, we're probably talking over $100,000 in interest and penalties due to the incorrect way it was done to begin with. Not to mention the attorney's fees. This case has been working for years and years and years, and I know what I pay my attorneys, and my attorneys are not the level of these folks. Thanks for watching, Dustin. If you have any questions, we're talking about having appraisals done the right way by qualified professionals rather than facing consequences thereafter. And we do appraisals here. We have taken USPAP certification courses, United States Professional Appraisals and Practices. I believe that's what that stands for. It's been a couple of years since I sat in the class. But whenever you're talking about IRS quality compatible appraisals, you have to have at least that minimum level of a USPAP certification and recognition. And there's ways to, anybody who does appraisals, ask them that question. Are you USPAS compliant? And if they're not, you want to look somewhere else. Or if you're just looking for an evaluation, you don't need to have the USPAP certification or compliance. You know, Cindy Rosebaugh is a pretty good friend of mine. She was president of the International Society of Appraisers for a couple of years. She's involved heavily with the Appraisal Foundation, which is basically a large group or small group that overlooks the appraisal organizations in America. There's the ASA, American Society of Appraisers, the ISA, the International Society of Appraisers, and there's, I think it's the AAA, American Appraisers Association. I think those are what those three are. But basically, there's three appraisal groups that founded the Appraisers Foundation. And I shared their article about this a couple of days ago. Their article skewed it to make it look like that auction houses can't do the work. That is not what the court said, and it's definitely not what is implied by this ruling. It isn't what the court said, and what is implied by this ruling is to make sure that your appraiser understands what is necessary and needed to be compliant with the tax audit and tax appraisal and tax situation, especially in a tax situation where you're talking about millions of dollars. So, but the Appraisal Foundation is a good overarching network organization that has put in place key metrics and key levels of education to establish the credibility of the appraiser in question. And in fact, the ISA has talked to us regularly about becoming members. Appraisal work for us, we do it. It's not a large portion of our business. In fact, we refer the majority of the appraisers out to professionals in the area that we've worked with for years. But if we were ever to develop that more in-house, we would look seriously and strongly at becoming involved in one or more of those organizations. And I would say that if you're looking for the next level appraisal work, to find somebody who's a member of the ISA, the ASA, the AAA, or other recognized, there are some other recognized organizations out there, but those are the top three. Those are the three that have been most diligent and most active in establishing groundwork, coursework, basic levels of instruction, basic levels of education, basic levels of knowledge in their appraisers to get different levels. And they have there's a lot of different levels and opportunities for education and development of a business that you can look for if you're looking for an appraiser. I'm going to wrap this up in just a minute, but thank you all for watching. If you have any questions, go ahead and post them here on Facebook in the messages and the comments here. You can always send us a direct message through our page. If you're watching us on YouTube or on LinkedIn later on, put a comment there. I'll try and respond to those as best I can. You can always send us an email at info@kcauctioncompany.com, info@ K, letter C, auction, company is spelled out.com, or give us a phone call at 816-283-3633. This is Behind the Gavel with Jason, a show I do pretty much every Friday, unless I'm on a plane or absolutely cannot make it the show happen. If you have questions about this week's conversation, or any other questions about estates, antiques, artwork, auctions, liquidation, appraisals, anything in that large circle of information, go ahead and let us know. We're always looking for direct response and influence and conversations with our friends, fans, people who are watching this. And if you have any of those questions, please let us know. Otherwise, have a great weekend. School has started next door here in Kansas City for the Quality Hill Academy. A lot of the other schools in the area start next week and the week after. My boys go back to school a week from next Monday. And so we were last night buying our youngest new sneakers and clothes for his school. We've already been doing that for William as well. Thank you all so much for watching. Again, if you have any questions, let us know, and we will talk to you next Friday.